Hi, welcome to DMAD Mammals Research Association's 19th lesson in our second free QGIS course. Today we're going to be looking at how we can add contour lines to our map. It is something which seems to terrify people and people seem to find really difficult, but actually it's a relatively simple process. We are getting towards the end of our second QGIS course, and we've learned an awful lot, especially since the very start. I know that there's some people that have done it right the way from the beginning to the end. I did say that I would stick around for as long as people needed me during the coronavirus pandemic. So please let me know if there is interest in carrying on with a third set of videos. Obviously, this takes an awful lot of time for DMAD. So we're only going to do it if people really want us to do it. So please just drop a comment below the video, drop us an email, whatever. Just let us know if you do want them to go ahead. Okay, thank you, and enjoy the lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to look at something which people seem to find a bit terrifying as a concept, but actually it's quite easy just following the steps that we've learned so far. And that is putting elevation contours onto our map. And actually it doesn't have to just be used for elevation. We can use it to show different any Z values. So we could do it to show the infrared values we talked about in our raster theory lesson. But generally it is for elevation. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn the raster layer, not that one, sorry, the complete raster layer back on. And as you can see, we can get a vague idea of the raster just from this. So we can see that the darker areas are obviously the lower areas going up to the lighter areas, which are the higher areas. But it's not immediately obvious, and sometimes it's nice to have numbers to quantify this as well. Humans are inherently lazy. And so it's nice to have more of a visual aid to sort of look at what these numbers actually represent. So actually adding contours is a really easy process. I'm going to show you very quickly, but you just go, it's very simple, just go raster extraction and then go to contour. In our input layer we want the raster that we're going to be getting our contours from. So this is complete raster, or whatever you've called your full country file. Band number, we've only got the option of grey, but the band number effectively is the tile itself, the raster tiling itself. So we've only got one band because we've only got elevation, but say you had multiple bands, then you would be able to choose which of these bands you were interested in. And then the interval between the contour line is where things begin to get a bit tricky, because depending on what scale you're working on and what sort of landscape, this is going to change dramatically. So for example, I'm going to do my contours today at 500 meters, and the attribute name, so this is what's being created alongside our ID column is elev. I'm just going to change it to elevation, but you could just leave it as elev if you wanted. And we don't want any offset from 0, but this gives us more options with what we can do with the lines. Okay, and then I'm just going to save it to a file. So I've got this file forever, and I'm just going to call it 500 meter contours. Save. Yes, I want to replace it, and then I'm just going to run this, and 500 meters is going to be relatively quick, and you see it's actually happened already. But obviously the smaller we put our contour layers together, the more time it's going to take to process, because it's obviously going to have to make more contour layers. And actually that doesn't seem to have worked, possibly because, oh no, actually it's just because it's below my raster. No, it hasn't worked, and that's just because I tried to overwrite the file, and occasionally QGIS doesn't like that. So I'm just going to go, again, raster, extraction, contour, complete raster. We want 500 meter contour lines. I'll leave it as LF, that's not particularly important. And then contours, save to a file. I'm just going to call it 500 meter contours 2, because obviously it didn't like that. Hit run. And like I said, the closer together you have your contours, the more lines that QGIS is going to have to calculate and draw, so the longer it's going to take. And you can see it's given me my 500 meter contours here. Personally, I like to have my contours just slightly darker than my country file. So the way I do that is I go into the colour, I go to pick colour, select the colour of my country file itself, and then I just go to the colour and just make it very slightly darker. And I generally find that has quite nice results. It's relatively nice looking on the eye. Okay, excellent. And you'll see that we have our contours now, but they're not particularly useful. They're not giving us that much more information. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the labels on as well. So single labels, obviously, go to the labeling tool here, and then rather than ID we're going to select LF. Just press apply and OK, and I'm just going to move this text down to 8 points instead of 10. And you can see it gives us a vague understanding of what we've got going on, really. So we can see that at the coast we've got contours of 0 and 500. Then as we go further inland, we're getting a larger area of 1000, apart from near the lake, where it obviously is down at 500 again. In the mountains, which are the areas that we identified as green, we've got areas of 2000 and 1500, and then it's obviously a ridge around here somewhere, because it decreases back along. And unfortunately that's all we can really show at this sort of level. But if we were to zoom into the area we were looking at yesterday, so it was around this area very roughly, we can see that actually between our river here it's at 500 and then our mountains here at 2000, we don't have a great deal of information going on. So if we were looking primarily at an area this size, well, let's go to the same scale we were at yesterday. So we'll take it to 40,000. Then we might want a bit more information. We might want to know where this line here goes from 1000 to 500, for example. And so what we can do in that case is just make our raster contours with a smaller interval between the lines. So this time I'm going to choose 250, and I'm going to save it again, save to file. It's always useful to save these because you never know when you're going to need to use them. So I just save that to 250, hit run. Okay, so perfect. And we can see these have come in, if you look carefully, between the 500 and the 250 lines. And actually, one thing some people do is they do put multiple contours in like this and don't label them. So rather than having the lines every 500 meters, we've got the lines every 500 meters with labels on, and the lines every 250 meters but with the labels off. So I can just turn that off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the labels this time. and I left it on ID this time by mistake, so I'm just going to switch that to elevation, click apply, and it still went back to elevation ID for some reason. So click apply, and there we go, perfect. So now we can see that we've got a couple more labels in here, and we can see that we've got the 750s and the 1250s and things, which just gives us a bit more information. So this area here, for example, we wouldn't have known that this increased from 500 to 2000 here, sorry, from 500 to 1750 here, or here, or any of these areas. You can see we've got a lot of 1750s which just wouldn't have been represented. It would have just appeared to go from 500 in this area, or sorry, 1500 in this area to 2000 in this area. So this looks a bit scruffy, and obviously I'd probably tidy it up in real life, but it's just an example. But I hope that's given you a bit of an idea. And we talked a lot about this, but obviously the amount of contours we're going to have on and the sort of interval between them is really dependent on the scale that we're looking at. So for example, if we were to have all of our labels on, we'd have to be really zoomed in. So I might go into 250 meter contours. This isn't a lot of use to me at the moment looking at this, so I might make it so that as we go into rendering, I might make scale dependent visibility. Just turn that on and make that 40,000, same as we did yesterday. It seems to be a reasonable number for our map. So if we do this and then zoom back into 40,000, you'll see that we can only see our labels at 40,000. So yeah, that's worked quite nicely. So I'll keep it at 40,000 because that's sort of useful information to me. You'll notice that I didn't put the buffer on around these, the text buffer on, and that's just because if you put the text buffer on, I'll show you. If you put the text buffer on, you can sort of lose your more important information on the map. So we'll put this on, and you can see that when I do this, that the zone areas sort of disappear into the information. It becomes far less apparent what's what, and so I'm just going to change that back to without a buffer, so that our zone information stands out a bit more. But obviously, again, this is virtually customizable as much as you want. You can change this to however you want, and one thing that you can do is you can just, if you're using the text, you can actually play around with it. We can, like we said, we can buffer, we can give it a background if we wanted to make it stand out a bit more. We could shadow it, we can make it call outs, so call outs just come out the line. We could do placement, and this is what I really wanted to show you, because at the moment we've got parallel lines, but we can actually make our text curved so it fits the lines a bit nicer. This is going to remove some of your contours because it requires more space. Sorry, remove some of your labels. All your contours will still be there because it requires more space. But QGIS is quite good at picking out the better ones. And you can see this is just a much nicer looking map because it curves around the contours. I'll show you, it'll probably work better on 500. So if we curve these, say placement and then curved, and you'll see it sort of curves around all the lines we've got a bit nicer. Actually it looked nicer on 250 to be honest, but yeah, it curves around everything a bit nicer, and just generally makes our map look a bit nicer. We might want to change these 250 to slightly smaller text size. At the moment it's really quite visible, so we could even whack this down to, it's a bit unorthodox, but I quite like 7 actually, because I find it still relatively legible at this size. And it again makes sure that it doesn't detract from our key information in a map, which is something we want to avoid doing. And the key information here obviously is that our zones, so our potential habitat zones. So I hope you found that useful, and yeah, I'll see you in the next lesson.